But yeah, so today we're going to talk about multi-way. I felt like multi-way was appropriate because, if you guys are playing a lot of live, naturally you'll be in a lot of multi-way spots. And so I'd like to start us off with one question. Better pot odds mean you should always call wider. True or false? You in the back.
False.
False. Okay. Did the two of you agree or disagree?
I say if it's heads up, it's true. If it's multi-way, false.
Okay. Yeah, very good. It is false. Better pot odds does not always mean you should call wider. I see that to be a very, very common mistake, where especially multi-way, like if you're defending the big blind, you'll get a raise, you'll get multiple callers, and people will be like, oh, fuck it, I'm getting 1,000,000 to 1 odds. Just gonna flick it in. Yeah, that's not always correct. So, got a couple sims prepared here as an example. Really, and I just, I think a lot of people don't recognize that you shouldn't always call wider when there's multiple people involved. But moreover, I think very few people realize just how much you have to tighten up. So in here, it's an under the gun open, folds to you in the big blind, and this is going to be your approximate big blind defense range against a 2.0 open, so fairly wide. Okay, and you don't have to memorize the exact range. I'm just trying to illustrate the point. But look at what happens when you get two callers involved. A cutoff caller and a button caller, right? We tighten up significantly. And if you were to put these side by side, you would see that, yeah, you're tightening up by about a margin of 50%. Like you're defending roughly half as wide with two people involved. Does this surprise anyone? Yeah, it's especially I think people who play a lot of live get this wrong a lot because live is so multi-way and people just tend to flick in whatever. But yeah, especially the hands that are offsuit perform very, very, very poorly. And also the suited gappers, right? Stuff like the Queen X suited, Jack X suited, 10X suited, that gets immediately cut. Now, why does this happen? Well, with poker, it's never any one reason. Usually it's a combination of multiple factors. But the main ones are going to be one, reverse implied odds. So if you're calling like a random suited hand with a low kicker, oftentimes when you put in a lot of money, you're going to be putting in against someone with a better kicker. On top of that, we know that being out of position in poker is bad. But what's worse than being out of position in poker is being out of position to multiple people. The more people you have behind you, the worse it gets. And that's going to be the case when, especially if you're defending the big blind multi-way, it gets really, really, really bad. Finally, you're basically taking a flop with a very, very capped range. Your range is very wide, it's very weak, and you have multiple players who are uncapped and going to be betting into you. It's just not a good situation. Now, this is not just reflected in defending the big blind. It's reflected in all spots. So here, we have under the gun open, and this is the range on the left that you should be defending the button with. So as you can see, normally, you're defending all the pairs, you're defending most of the ace-x suited, you're defending some of the offsuit hands against a min open. But when you have a cutoff call involved and you're still on the button, it tightens up. Now this effect is not as dramatic as the big blind one. To which degree that it changes, whether it's a lot or a little, kind of changes depending on the situation. But basically, in every single pre-flop spot, more villains will always equal tighter. Now, how do we feel about having players behind us multi-way? I mentioned earlier that we don't like it when people are behind us, right? And it's easy to say like, oh, we don't want this to happen. The question is, how bad is it when there's someone behind us? So in this sim, we open hijack, small blind, 3 bets. So you can see on the right there. And this is our defending range. So again, fairly wide. Orange is call, blue is 4 bet, red is fold. Again, don't try to memorize the exact range. I'm just using a sim for reference. But look how much that changes when 2 players call behind us and we face a squeeze. So cutoff calls, button calls, and instead of just a 3-bet, we face the squeeze from the big blind. So again, all the same positions, right? We're opening the same position, the same players 3-betting us. The only difference is that we have 2 players calling behind us. And look at how dramatic of a difference, Look at how dramatic of a difference this is. We're going from doing a ton of calling and a little bit of folding to mostly folding, a lot more raising, and very, very little calling. The conclusion here is that in all spots, it's really, really, really bad to go to the next street with people behind you, right? You want to avoid that at all costs, and how you can avoid that is by 1, raising more, and 2, folding more. So, what have we learned so far? We've learned that pot odds are a scam, especially multi-way.
Nice.
Yeah, they're a scam. Yeah, you can't just justify a poor call with the logic of like, oh, hey, I've got 1,000,000 to 1 odds, I'm going to flick it in. A lot of people do that. Additionally, we really, really, really hate having players behind us. We want to avoid that at all costs. Of course, sometimes when you have really strong hands that don't play well as a fold and don't play well as a re-raise, you kind of just have to call. But a lot of other hands that are more marginal, right, you would much rather just toss it. Additionally, you really, really want to avoid being out of position or in the middle as much as possible, especially multi-way. The only player who really has the advantage is the guy who's last. I call this having absolute position. I don't know if this is a term that other people use, but yeah, just multi-way being the absolute last one to act is going to be a huge advantage no matter what. And finally, beating out 2 or more villains is significantly more difficult than beating out 1 villain. It's probably, depending on the formation, more than twice as hard. And I'll go into why that is in a little bit. Now, the question a lot of you are probably asking is that, does this translate post-flop? Does everything we just learned about multi-way translate to post-flop play? Okay, so I'm going to start you guys off with this scenario, okay? I said aces here, but we're going to change it to queens. We're going to change it to queens. Okay, so you open queens. You open queens in the hijack, so you open queens in MP. Button and big blind call. Okay, flop comes 7-3-2. Raise your hand if you would c-bet this flop. Okay, so about 40% of you. Okay, Peter,
Yep.
right? Why would you c-bet this flop? Give me some reasons.
I would bet it for value. I think I can get called by flush draws, worse pairs.
Okay. All right, so you can bet it for value, right? Especially if you have a lower overpair, you want some protection, right? There's a flush draw out there. Maybe you don't want another overcard to come. I know I said aces, but let's assume we have like queens or jacks or something. Yep. Okay, someone who didn't raise their hand. Who didn't raise their hand? Someone explain to me why you would check it. Okay, Victor.
Sure, just protecting our checking range is not necessarily a great flop for our opening range.
Right.
Behind, they'll call with like 7-6 suited, 8-7 suited, a bunch of these kind of hands, and we can turn this into like one of our check raise value hands.
Right.
And yeah, we're just kind of like sandwiched between 2 players, so it's not super comfortable.
Not super comfortable. Okay, so let's see which of these factors wins out, right? Both of you presented very compelling arguments, both to check and both to bet. Let's see which one wins out. So, yeah, we are in fact doing a lot of checking. And we're drawing upon the principles that we touched upon earlier. Whereas, 1, it's really, really bad to be in the middle. 2, it's really bad to not be the one last to act. And 3, yeah, it's just really, really hard to beat out multiple opponents. And anytime the situation is not advantageous for us, I'm trying to think of an exception, but I basically can't off the top of my head. So I will say anytime you have all these these factors working against you, it's never going to be a mistake to take the line where you put less money in. right? As you can see here, the solver is basically checking, there's like a little bit of blue in there, but what I would do in practice is simplify to checking my entire range. So I would never c-bet this spot. I would blindly check every single hand, defend my checking range, and play check raises with my strongest holdings as well as my bluffs. So why don't we c-bet, right? Again, a lot of people would say, right, those are the traditional arguments. We want to protect our hand, we want to get value, we want to put money in because we have that overpair advantage. This is kind of, like I think when, just like the very, very like classic arguments people have for c-betting this spot. But the advantage of solvers is that solvers, we can learn a lot of things that might be intuitive to the human mind. The computer actually really disagrees. And so, I probably sound like a broken record, but we're touching upon the things we've learned. Position is power, right? C-betting allows two people to react to our decision. So if we bet, we have two people who act behind us, and they can both react to what we just did. That's a bad thing. You want to be the one reacting, not the one being reacted to. If we check, we flip that around. We actually get to react to the button and the big blind. Because if we check and the button stabs, the big blind has to act. And all of a sudden, by checking, we've kind of artificially bought ourselves position. That's a really, really great thing. Position is power. We want to, manipulate the situation to get that to our advantage whenever we can. And finally, on that specific board, even though we have the overpair advantage, basically the rest of our range whiffs. We have a million overcards. Everything else whiffs. And due to the board being low in nature, the button as well as the big blind are just going to hit it a lot more. Okay, so let's say we check. Okay, let's say we check. Button stabs, and the big blind puts in a raise. So we basically have three options, right? Raise, call, or fold. For the sake of discussion, let's condense raise and call into one category. And we'll put fold in the other category. Raise your hand if you would either call or raise here. Raise your hand if you would fold. Okay, one person raised their hand total. Like, guys, come on.
Call or raise, probably.
Okay, call or raise.
Depends if I have a club.
Call or raise.
Call.
Call.
It's snap fold.
Snap fold.
Call.
Call. Call. Okay, so most people are calling, and we have one snap fold. All right, let's see what the computer wants to do. So so solver is basically folding entire range here. So whoever said snap fold, great job. Like even kings and aces, right? You can see the top left are indifferent. Queens is snap folding. Everything, basically you're not really ever happy continuing with anything unless it's like the nuts or you have like a nut flush draw, which is a clean out. Now, why is this? It's because of cumulative odds. And so I think a lot of people have it in their mind, right, from playing heads up, that like, okay, like it's very unlikely that a player has us beat by a set, a two pair. And while that might be true individually for each single player, when you add in villains to the hand, it becomes cumulative. So if one person has like a 5% chance of having a set, 4 people means there's a 20% chance that somebody has a hand in this, a set in the hand, right? And that becomes a lot worse when you have an overpair. So in this scenario, right, like I'm just spitballing some numbers, oh shit, right? If the button has us beat 20% of the time, heads up, it's not a big deal. We have enough pot odds to continue against someone who beats us 20%. If the big blind beats us 35%, heads up, it's not a big deal either, because due to pot odds, we can profitably continue while being beat 35% of the time against one person. But when you add those two together, it's cumulative and it gets a lot worse. Now, over half the time, somebody in the hand has you beat, and because there's a big ass raise in front of you, you don't have the odds to continue. And so that's why, like, I think very, very, very few people anticipate how tight you're supposed to be in this spot. And this spot is just a fun fact. It's a really common way where two people are trying to collude, will collude. In a multi-way spot, if you suspect you're being colluded against, one of the most common ways is two people will do this bet and raise action before you because you're just fucked. You have to fold. Okay, so now we've talked about what to do against a bet plus a raise. Moving on to what to do against a bet and a call. So, drawing on what we know previously, we know that we don't want to be in the middle. We know that we want to tighten up when multiple players show interest in the pot. How do we accomplish both of these goals? Well, we raise more, fold more, and we call less. Calling is bad because it guarantees that we take the next street as the player in the middle. That's really bad. Folding is good because, we put less money in a spot that's bad for us. We don't have to take the next street being in a disadvantaged position. That's also good. But I think a lot of people don't realize that when you raise, it forces, almost always, it forces at least one player in the hand out, and then all of a sudden you're not in the middle of it anymore. Because if the big blind folds, you're not in the middle. If the button folds, you're not in the middle either. Both are really, really good outcomes for you. So we raise more, fold more, call less. What are we raising with? So, right, this is kind of the scenario. We check, button stabs. This is a straddled sim, so the straddle, the straddle calls. Normally it would be the big blind. Yeah, we would raise our value, we'd raise our overpairs, we raise our draws. I don't think this is too hard of a range to construct. Flush draws, gut shots, overpairs, sets, pretty straightforward. But the thing I want to highlight is how calling is the least attractive option. We're doing more raising and more folding than calling. Calling in the orange is the slimmest one there is. And so a lot of people, when they're playing these multi-way spots, they really like to overcall. They're like, fuck it, like I've got second pair I'm calling, or I've got like a flush draw I'm calling. Like you really, really want to avoid that. And if at all possible, either fold your hand or raise your hand. Obviously, there's going to be some holdings with which it's kind of inevitable and you have to call. For example, top pair weak kicker is a really good example of that. Right, like you raising like a 7, a lot of the times doesn't really get value. It doesn't really fold out better. But yeah, in general, avoid overcalling as much as possible. This goes pre-flop and post-flop. Okay. In conclusion, is this all I have? How are we doing on time? 6:30. Shit, that's fine. I have backup content for us, so in case we run out of time. Yeah, in conclusion, pot odds are a scam multi-way. We really hate having players behind us. Want to avoid being out of position or in the middle as much as possible. Don't try to play multi-way. Beating out 2 villains is significantly harder than beating out 1 villain. And again, the more that people show an interest in the pot, the more you just want to get out of there, right? There's a lot of spots multi-way in which there's a lot of action before you in the form of a bet and multiple callers. or especially a bet and a raise where you just fold everything. Yeah, you can't, like sometimes, it's just not your place to win. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Avoid calling in the middle as much as possible. Okay, so I think, given that we have half an hour left, I think I'll take some questions now. If anyone has any questions, if anyone has a spot they want to talk about, happy to go over that. And then if not, we're just going to open up the sim and start looking at random shit.
At the very beginning, you asked a question about just like your range being wider.
Yeah.
Does that give you like better odds or something like that? Okay, so we learned multi-way, that's a no-no.
Yeah.
But heads up, between you and one other,
Right.
should your, is it all right to have a wider range?
Given that you have better odds?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. Especially because, okay, you know what? This is a good concept. Especially in the big blind, you do want to widen up as long as you're getting better odds. But in general, only the big blind, because closing the action has a lot of value. So you'll notice, okay, let me see. I just ignore all this random shit.
Wait, stay on that.
Stay on that? Okay, all right, I'm going back. Yeah, this might be a bit more of a basic concept, but closing the action has incredible value, which is why against this 2 big blind raise, right, we're defending so wide in the big blind, right, but we're so much tighter in the small blind, right? Just the possibility of someone squeezing you post flop, right, really cuts down on your EV. Sorry, did I say post flop? I meant pre-flop. But this actually applies post flop as well. So I'm just gonna pull up the just gonna connect to the server. I rent a server to run my multi-way sims. It has 500 gigabytes of RAM. Don't try this one at home, but yeah, so again, touching upon how it's really important to close the action, right? Let's look at the sim where, hijack checks, button stabs, and it folds around into the big blind. Now, who here is familiar with the concept of MDF, or minimum defense frequency? All right, about half of you, okay. So against a 1/3 bet, because the pot's about 22 or so, button stabbing for 7 big blinds. What does MDF say you have to defend against a 1/3 bet? Can anyone answer me?
Is it 25% of your hands?
Well, you can fold 25% of your hands. You have to defend 75%. But yes, you against a very small bet, theory dictates that you can only fold 25% of your range, and you have to continue 75% of your range. But what does this fold number say? What is the big blind folding? We're only allowed to fold, according to MDF, we can only fold 25%. But here, it's folding 56%. And the reason for that is because MDF is more of a theoretical thing. In practice, there's a lot of other factors that go into play. One of which is that the big blind does not close the action, right? Back to kind of what we talked about earlier. The fact that you don't close the action as the big blind and that the hijack can back raise you significantly decreases your EV and means a lot of hands that otherwise could continue would just have to fold. What are some examples of this, right? An example of this would be pocket fives, right? It's second pair, it's a pretty good pair, right? It's a pretty good pair. You're facing a small stab. A lot of people would just continue it. And if it were heads up, this would be a pretty good continue. But the problem is you're not heads up. You're not closing the action. You don't guarantee yourself the next street. and there's a player behind you that can just back raise and squeeze you out. And so as such, we have to tighten up pretty significantly. So yes, that's the long-winded answer to your question. Does anyone else have a question? Yes?
These like multi-way takeaways are assuming your opponents are playing optimally, right? So then in a live pool where like you can probably assume that players are more passive, and like for example, like if you call or flat in the middle, like you likely won't get squeezed behind. How would you adjust for a live?
So the bad news I have for you is that I don't think it actually matters as much as you think, because yes, you're gonna get squeezed less, right? That's a very valid point. But the problem is that even if you don't get squeezed, we're still coming back to those cumulative odds, right? Like let's say you're playing a live situation here, right? It's the same board, same spot, you're in the big blind, you have sixes. Even if people aren't gonna squeeze you, you've got 3 players behind, right? Individually, each player might have a 10% chance of having a 7, but cumulatively with those 4 people, there's now a 40 to 50% chance that someone has a 7 in the hand and has you beat. So yes, being that people are not going to back raise you as wide can give you a little bit more leeway. I'm afraid I just don't think it's like as much as you would otherwise hope for. And I've definitely seen some people make some very let's say speculative calls, not understanding that principle. So to answer your question succinctly, you can widen up a little bit, but probably not as much as you're thinking. Yeah. It's a great question though, great question. Anyone else?
Would you like prefer a raise rather than a call?
Sorry?
If you were going to make a different action other than fold, would you prefer a raise in that spot versus a call?
In the...
If there's like pocket fives you're turning into a bluff or something. I know you're just saying like just pure fold because of the cumulative effect and it's just not profitable.
Yeah.
How about a raise?
Okay, that's actually a pretty good question. So another quirk of multi-way is that blockers actually matter a good amount more multi-way. And what ends up happening is because of those cumulative factors, right? Like for example, everyone in the hand has a 5% chance of having a set. And so there's a 30-40% chance that someone has a set. I'm just making up numbers, but just take the example. So because of that, having a set blocker becomes way more important multi-way. So you notice, right? You said turning the 5s into a bluff, right? But look at what the solver actually does. It takes a hand like King 3, which is a set blocker to middle set, and turns that into a bluff right away. Fives is an exceptionally poor bluff. I would not raise it because it just kind of like doesn't really do anything, and it doesn't block the tippity top of like everyone else's range. But yeah, having a set blocker becomes incredibly powerful multi-way, and you can see that reflected, right? If you get the bet and the call, right, it folds back to the hijack. You can see it turns ace deuce and ace 3 pure into raise bluffs. How many of you are finding that? Oh, great. Once a year. But yeah, having the bet and the dead money in front of you, stuff like the set blocker becomes a very lucrative raise. In fact, maybe some of you guys noticed this earlier, but in some situations, right, when you have this bet and multiple calls in front of you, it even just starts turning top pair into a bluff. Because the chance that your top pair is going to be good across all the turns and all the rivers against 3 or 4 people, it's very slim. And so you might as well be like, yo, I blocked top set, I'm just going to start blasting. Oh, here's a great question. Let's say you do make this raise, okay? Let's say you do make this raise here, okay? and you had to pick one player that you would rather play the turn against, would you rather play the turn against the button, or would you rather play the turn against the big blind? Raise your hand if you would rather play the turn against the button. Raise your hand if you would rather play the turn against the big blind. Okay. One of you, why the big blind over the button?
They've reacted passively. The only person to take the aggressive action has been the button so far.
Excellent, excellent, excellent answer. So the button is uncapped. He's bet. He has all the sets in his range. He has all the good stuff in his range. He is uncapped. You do not want to take a turn against him and continue to barrel. Especially if you're playing live, I think someone in the button situation will be absolutely too sticky. I would not go about trying to blast him off whatever he has on the turn and river. But on the other hand, in the big blind, it's flipped, right? Most people, if they had a set, if they had two pair, they would immediately go and raise. And so by calling, by taking that passive action, they've gone and capped themselves. So if you raise in the hijack position here, right, button folds, big blind calls, on a brickish turn, you're doing a lot of blasting. You're putting a lot of pressure on, because now you've kind of got this guy on the ropes. He now has all the bad situations that we didn't want earlier, right? He's now out of position. He's now capped. He's now taken a passive action by calling the button stab and then calling your raise. So he's fucked. He doesn't have anything good in his range. He's so capped at one pair. And yeah, this is just a chance where, you've got that set blocker, you've got ace three, ace deuce, you blast him off. You've got a flush draw, you keep blasting. You've got, right, you for whatever reason decided to turn your top pair onto the flop into a bluff. Yeah, you just keep blasting. And you don't really slow down. You just kind of, you get to a brick river and you kind of just, you kind of just keep blasting, right? It's a lot of blasting. And notice how thin we're going for value, right? Any decent king is playing for stacks because big blind is capped at one pair. He at best has a 7. What's he gonna have? What's he gonna do? So yeah, we can go super thin for value, right? We turn a king, and we can go basically like anything for, like basically all of our bluffs are following through. Like, yeah, a couple give ups here and there, but like in practice, you could just like majority follow through and it'd be fine. So yeah, in practice, what does that mean? You want to attack the cap player. You do not want to attack the uncapped player, right? If the button calls, you just give up turn. You're like, yeah, I'm out of here. Like, fuck this shit. Like, I don't want to put in more money against the button. Complete opposite scenario against the big blind. Yeah, whoever sent me down this line of talking, excellent, excellent topic. Really glad you brought that up.
So for would you prefer to leave enough behind to triple barrel, or what do you think about overbetting a turn?
That's a really good question, and I think a lot of that just like depends on your stack depth, right? Like this simulation was done at 100 big blinds, so 100 big blinds deep, you can just B75 the turn, jam the river, very, very clean. Obviously, if you're playing live, a lot of that's a lot more deep stacked. What I personally prefer to do I personally would prefer to just B75 the turn, like a little bit, I guess you could call it like a medium, smallish size, whatever. And then if it bricks out, go for the really, really large overbet. Because what that ends up doing is if you size down the turn a little bit, it gives more urgency to villain to show the strength of his hand. Because if villain has, for whatever reason, a trap or he turned two pair, villain's gonna be like, ah, shit, like I gotta raise now, get stacks in, like. And so when he doesn't do that, he ends up being even weaker on the river, and you can put additional pressure on his range. yeah, I think that's kind of how I would go about doing this here. But yeah, great question. All right. Anyone else? That's been a really good audience so far. Trying to think if there's anything. Yes.
Well, this is like really specific, but is 7-8 here shoving for value? Yeah, right.
Well, you can very easily test that by,
Probably trying to get all the better sevens to fold.
yeah, it's not shoving for value because you're shoving because you have blockers to sets and 2 pairs.
So you're assuming you have no showdown value, like checking, you're just gonna get beat by better seven.
Well, let's put it this way, right? Big blind, call the button stab, call your flop raise, call your turn bet. So what are the odds he's done all that calling with air? Right, very slim. So it's important to recognize that, yeah, by the time your villain's called 3 bets, he probably has showdown. And in that context, your top pair, no kicker, is no good, right? You were bluffing it on the flop. You were bluffing it on the turn. It's going to continue to be a bluff on the river. Now, God, one of you guys is going to like blast it off tonight with like one pair and be like, fucking Kevin told me to. It's his fault.
So then where does the highest, I guess, like showdown value of like your bluff go? Like there was queen 7 shoving as well. That's also a bluff?
So I think, so I guess this is a good spot for me to talk about my approach to poker, okay? My approach to poker is very top-down. Notice how, as I've gone through this presentation with you guys, and this is what I do for my students as well, it's all overall concepts. When people talk about, learn the fundamentals of poker, that's what they're talking about. Stuff like, it's just really bad to be multi-way. It's good to attack someone capped. It's bad to blast into someone uncapped. It's bad to overcall, right? These are fundamentals. These are overarching concepts. My opinion is that it's not helpful to try to split hairs between like this exact threshold. I could probably like give you some answer for why queen 7 bets, queen 7 checks, but when you realize how sensitive solver outputs are, like I could change one tiny aspect of the sim and they would do completely different. So like you're basically trying to figure out something that's like feather light sensitive, whereas I just don't think it's like a productive use of time to split hairs between like that threshold. So when I do coaching with my clients, I'm never like, this is the sim, memorize the board, figure out the exact cutoff. I'm just saying like, this is a good spot to blast, find as many bluffs as you can. If you get the threshold a little bit wrong, that's fine because 99% of people aren't blasting this spot at all. Know that you have to blast the spot, be willing to get the threshold a little bit wrong, and you're gonna outperform everyone else. Don't split hairs. Splitting hairs is a very bad habit in poker. I would not, I would not recommend that. You'll drive yourself insane. But yeah. Anything else? Anything else? Back to. But yeah, I guess this is as good a time as any to wrap. If you're a poker player and you're currently, spending a lot of time on poker, you're break even, slightly winning online. If you mostly play live, you probably have to be like relatively healthily winning, and you want to make a full-time income, follow me, reach out. I work with clients on a CFP basis, which means all we take is a small deposit up front, and we get a cut of your winnings down the line. But yeah, generally it would have to be someone who spends a lot of time on poker, you have full-time aspirations, and you're already somewhat knowing what you're doing.
Kevin, when you say you're already winning or break even, what's the best way for your potential, for the people you're talking to today, how can they gauge if they're break even or if they're slightly winning?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Online, it's pretty straightforward. Play a 50,000 hand sample. If you broke even in that sample, you're probably that's probably around where you're at. Live, I would say, track your results. Obviously, if you guys aren't tracking results, y'all better start. But yeah, I would say live, about 50 hours should do the trick. If you've played 50 hours of live and you're up or you're break even, I would say that's probably a good benchmark of where you are. In general. But yeah, great question.
And the VClub app tracks all your stats. At least that you're playing here, so that saves you a stat. Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
download the VClub app. Thank you, everyone.